My book is called, as you heard, Final Victory. Final Victory suggests that there were nothing but victories in his life. Actually, that wasn't the case. He did have 2 terms as a state senator from New York State. He became Assistant Secretary of the Navy during World War I. He then was chosen to be the vice presidential candidate on the Democratic ticket in 1920 when the Democrats were sure to lose, and they lost. He lost with them. But he thought that this would only energize his career. He had national visibility. He was going to go on and do other things, but that was 1920. In 1921, he suffered an attack of polio, lost the use of his legs. He was paralyzed from that time on, and the period we're dealing with now is 23 years into that period of immobility on his part. I don't think the public realized how paralyzed he was, that he had no agility physically, though he had a good deal of agility verbally. He was a brilliant speaker. He was a brilliant combiner of words, and most of the public never knew that he was, to use the word then in use, crippled. Pictures were not taken of him in a wheelchair. Pictures were not taken of him using braces or crutches. If they were, the press was very discreet. They didn't do such things back then. Today, the press would be a lot less discreet. But we're now dealing with a Roosevelt that the public thought they knew, but they didn't really know very well. He gave speeches on radio. There was no television yet. Speeches on radio that were called fireside chats. He had no fireside as he spoke, and the people he spoke to listened on their little Philco Bakelite radios that were not near any fireside either. This was just the make-believe that was done in the media at the time. He gave a tremendous number of press conferences during his presidency, nearly 1,000 press conferences. And he did so by sitting behind his desk. People didn't realize that he sat behind his desk because he couldn't stand up. They just accepted it for what it was. He was very astute in what he said. He was warm-hearted and humorous. And during World War II, when there were problems about prices and shortages and so on, he knew exactly what to say and when to say it. For example, at one point, he tried to stress that the prices of things were not really very high, just that you shouldn't buy them at the wrong times. And he said, someone visited me who was a foreman in one of the substantial trades. Can you imagine a foreman in a factory coming to visit Roosevelt at the White House? He said, he came to me last January and said to me, my old lady is ready to hit me over the head with a dishpan. I said, what's the trouble? The cost of living. Well, I said, what for instance? Well, last night I went home and the old lady said, what's this? I went out to buy some asparagus, and do you see what I've got? I've got 5 sticks, and that cost me $1.25. It's an outrage. Well, I looked at him and said, when have you been buying asparagus in January, fresh asparagus? Oh, he said, I never thought of that. Well, I said, tell that to the old lady with my compliments. Someone at the press conference then said, was that the same guy who complained about the price of strawberries? And he said, oh no, that was someone else. Of course, they were all make-believe, but a lot of communication to the public was make-believe. The real communication dealt with more significant matters. For example, we went through the worst depression in our history, the worst war in our history, and he was the president during both of those, and we did very well to get out of them as we did. But in 1944, he said, we're long past Dr. New Deal, that is dealing with the social safety net. we have to deal with Dr. Win the War. This was from a press conference. And we dealt with Dr. Winning the War, except that there was still a part of the safety net that hadn't been established, the GI Bill. The GI Bill was fought over in Congress in 1944 before the election, and many conservatives in Congress complained that the GI Bill would stifle the urge of returning veterans to go to work. We didn't need it. It was socialism. Well, the GI Bill, it turns out, was actually written by a former chairman of the Republican National Committee for Roosevelt. And it had a hard time getting through Congress. Roosevelt finally had to appeal to a congressman from Georgia who was absent to come and vote, and the GI Bill passed by one vote. It's possibly the most significant legislation about social mobility in the history of this country. It passed by one vote, and it was written by a Republican, this socialist legislation. And we have an equivalent, as in the introduction you heard it said, we have an equivalent now. We have what is called Obamacare. Obamacare was drafted and written by Republicans for Romney. Governor Romney's Romney Care is Obamacare with very few words changed. But here we are again with another parallel with 1944 and the last year, the last full year of World War II. World War II in 1944 was not yet a very settled thing. We had been invading islands in the Central Pacific that the Japanese had taken over earlier in the war. We had not yet landed in Europe. D-Day would not be until June the 6th, 1944, which I remember because my wedding anniversary is the 10th anniversary of D-Day. I don't know what that has to say about our marriage, but in any case, I won't forget the anniversary because of it, or the date of D-Day. But the result of this unsettled war at this point was that Roosevelt felt that he had to continue on. The war had to be won, and the peace after that had to be won. But was there somebody else to take his place? He was not well. He knew he was not well. He didn't know how sick he was, but he knew he was not well. And the cover of my book shows Roosevelt quite gaunt, the way he actually looked in 1944. Behind me is a flattering picture of Roosevelt, supposedly done early in 1945 at Yalta, but it's flattering and it looks like a campaign poster. It wasn't the Roosevelt of reality at that point. Roosevelt's collars were too big, his shirts hung on him. He had lost 19 pounds in the previous year. His wife and his daughter, Anna, said, "You really need to get a checkup." And he said, "I get a checkup every day. My doctor, that is the Surgeon General of the Navy, Ross McIntyre," he said, "comes in every day and checks me out." Well, he did. He came in every day. He was an ENT physician. What is ENT? Ear, nose, and throat, yes. He sprayed his throat. That was what he did. He didn't check his blood pressure. He didn't check his temperature. He didn't check anything else. He sprayed his throat and he left. But he was a vice admiral in the Navy and the Surgeon General of the Navy. So he was, after all, a big man, and who was going to counter what he had to say? Nevertheless, because of the badgering of Anna Roosevelt and Eleanor Roosevelt, Franklin was taken to Bethesda Naval Hospital. It was almost new at that time. It was a newly opened facility. He was taken there in a limousine with his wheelchair. His wheelchair was an old kitchen chair with wheels attached. He didn't want to be seen in a conventional wheelchair, a hospital-type wheelchair, because he didn't want to be thought of as a cripple. So he sat in the wheelchair and he was pushed along in the kitchen chair. You can see that kitchen chair